Hello, and welcome to Sisal Presents, a language and literacy podcast, sponsored by the Northern Illinois University Center for the Interdisciplinary Study of Language and Literacy, or Sisal. Our mission is to support interdisciplinary collaboration in language and literacy research. My name is Henry Thomaser, and I'm a graduate assistant for the center. I'm joined today by Dr. Mandy Ferreira-Stutenberg, Sisal Deputy Director, as well as Associate Professor and Director of Undergraduate Studies in the Department of World Languages and Cultures at Northern Illinois University. Welcome, Mandy.
Hi, thanks, Henry.
We're both thrilled to welcome Dr. Xabier Granja Ibarreche, Associate Professor of Spanish and Director of Undergraduate Studies in the Department of Modern Languages and Classics at the University of Alabama. Not only do Xabi and Mandy share the role of Director of Undergraduate Studies, they also shared an office in graduate school and have been colleagues and friends for nearly 2 decades. Welcome, Xabi.
Thank you. Hi.
Awesome. Well, we're so glad to have you. Henry, thanks so much for that introduction. Xabi, can we get started with you just kind of sharing a little bit about your personal background, kind of how you ended up sharing an office with me in Chicago?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you to Sisal for inviting me. You and I have known each other for 20 years now, nearly. I come from the city of Bilbao in the north of Spain, in the coast of the north. I studied English over there, and then as I was finishing my career, I kind of wanted to change locations. I wanted to explore the world, and so I thought crossing the big ocean was a big idea to just see more populations, more cultures. And this is when I was told that I would be a good fit for a literature program because I was already good at literature, and I decided to switch to Spanish literature, and then that's kind of how you and I met in that program, right?
Yeah.
In 2007.
Exactly. Wonderful. All right, so you came to the University of Illinois, Chicago, to study Spanish literature, and at that time you were doing Renaissance literature, and you're here today talking about putting the AI in Renaissance. So how did you get from Renaissance literature to artificial intelligence and machine learning?
So it's been an interesting and unexpected journey because the connection is not very clear, right?
Right.
I've worked on 500, 600, 700-year-old documents, oftentimes judicial. There's a lot of crime involved, right? It's not easy to think of how this connects to technology. There are a lot of documents available in archives that are oftentimes digitized but not transcribed. Okay. And so there is no way to either search for text or be able to read it in a digital way. So part of what I wanted to do is how can I make any of this material accessible in something like a Kindle, for example, that you could read easily instead of having to go to specific websites or specific archives to be able to access it. Okay. And this is kind of what started getting me interested in how can I make this more accessible, not just for the accessibility's sake, but also for material preservation, right? It's good to have it digitized, but transcription enables many more formats that then ensure that we can preserve many of these documents. And this is kind of how I started going from 700-year-old text to being able to actually have it digitized in a way that is much more accessible.
Okay, fantastic. Right, because most graduate students who want to look at these texts can't travel to do archival research. So with your work, they're able to access
those materials without actually having to cross an ocean.
Amazing. Fantastic. Okay, so how did you learn? So your training historically was in English and then in literature. How did you learn to use these tools?
It was also a little bit of just bumping around until I figured things out, right?
Okay.
I personally like technology in all aspects of life, so it was a natural fit for me. The main reason that actually got me interested in this, just being aware of what's going on with AI in society, was there is a particular author that is called Luisa de Padilla. She was a countess, a noblewoman who was very religious, and she wanted to fix the issues of the world through Christianity, right? And so she wrote these books. They're fantastic. They're really interesting to see how they show you how 17th century, like 1649, thinks in Spain about how to fix this through religion, all the debauchery, excesses, things like that. And so these are just digital scans, but what I want for this world to have is a digital version of these books that are accessible to everyone. Mm-hmm. And that was going to be my pet project a few years from now, once I get to full professor, and it's like, okay, this is my passion project, and I want the world to have this. Even if no one else cares, I care. And I think a lot of people will actually care. So as I was aware of all the technology that is happening, I thought, well, if Acrobat can actually do optical character recognition on a digital document, then can we make this happen for much more difficult texts that are very complicated to read, be it either things that are published 500 years ago, which use completely different conventions of printing, and they're much more variable than the standard format we have today, or even handwriting, right? That's the next frontier. That's much, much, much tougher. And so thinking of this and seeing how the AI field is evolving, I thought, can I actually get a computer to try to do this in a mechanical way that it would take me years, because it would take me multiple years to transcribe. We're talking about hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages. It's about 2,000 pages overall for all 4 volumes, which I would still enjoy doing, but it's a lot of time that if I can speed that up, why not? And this is kind of how I ended up getting into the AI technology and trying to train algorithms to do this for me. Not entirely, because they cannot replace me. That is not possible. Not now, probably not in decades, maybe in 50 years, I don't know. But for now, they still need me to do quality control. But if it can do 90% of the work and then I can just fix the rest, that's a 90% improvement in efficiency.
Yeah, absolutely. We were talking a little bit earlier about, because I was asking you about the character recognition and why that's such a challenge. Can you go into that just a little bit?
Sure. So the way we read is natural to us because we are basically meatbags that have evolved for millions of years into like how to pattern recognize, right? A computer can do that in a different way. And I actually think artificial intelligence is a really interesting term because I don't think we should call it artificial intelligence because it's not actual intelligence. It's not artificial. It's an alternative intelligence, right? It does not think the way we think. And people often in the consumer world think that, oh, this is copying what people do. It does not. It operates in a very different way. And so you and I know when we see an A, we know that it has kind of a triangular shape and then there's like a horizontal bar in the middle, right? We can recognize that A. We've been trained to do that since we were born to read. As long as you've been lucky to be literate, right? You know how to do that. That doesn't just happen. Your brain gets good at pattern recognition. While AI uses neural networks, and they're called neural because they're actually mimicking how our brain works, right? There is this net of neural cells that think in a similar way of how our brain is structured, but it's not the same. It does not know, and it has not had millions of years of evolution to figure out how to read. But we can expedite the process, which is what we do. Right? And so by doing this, there are different types. Some are better at recognizing patterns. Some are better at recognizing images. You probably have seen the tech demo anywhere in YouTube, like, this is a cat, this is a car, right? So that would be picture recognition. Now pattern will be, this is a horizontal line, this is a vertical line, right? And so by training this, and there's different methods to do it, but by training this to do, to look at a scanned page, it can realize, well, this is a diagonal, this is a different type of diagonal, this is a horizontal, this is a vertical. And so eventually by training with millions and millions of images, which I don't have, so this is slow progress, but by doing this over and over and over and over, we are essentially training it to be able to read that text and recognize that sometimes that A is straight, sometimes that A is a little fuzzy, sometimes the A is a little moved, and eventually we'll learn to recognize all those variations and get much better at reading, just like both you and I got better at reading since we're, through elementary as you study.
Sure. And you talked about, maybe eventually the goal would be for the machine model to be able to recognize 90% of the letters of the characters. That additional 10%, is that like a relic of, like a printing press error? And would that maybe be something, like I've never done archival research. So when you're reading the primary, or when you're looking at the original manuscript, when an A, for example, gets askew, is then that going to be carried through for the rest until they replace that letter in the printing press, or is that something that could be taken into account with the machine learning?
So the smarter you make the code, obviously the better it will read, right? It's interesting that you mentioned exactly if there's one mistake, will it carry over? Because yes, it will, right? It will do whatever you train it to do. Just like we as people can learn something incorrect and then repeat that mistake, the machine will do the exact same thing, right? So you have to train it, you have to educate it. Now, the way this will work is that you have an innate intuition on how to figure something out that does not fit the norm. The machine doesn't have that. And so you need to kind of teach it nuance. And this is the hardest part for a computer to figure out, that this might be a blonde cat, this might be a black cat, and they're still cats. But until it learns that this shape in this different color, maybe this different coat, is still a cat. It doesn't know that it's a cat, which to you is immediately obvious, right? You mentioned printing issues, and this is actually one of the main complications that in the 16th century, there's printing is very variable, right? We're talking about early printed books, so oftentimes they use, later on in history, they will use like metal blocks for letters, but in the 1600s, it's pretty common to still have them made of wood. So you're using presses, and as you're pressing ink over hundreds and hundreds of times, eventually a wood block will break. So when it breaks, what do? You use what you have. So U's and V's kind of look similar enough that you could interchange them and you can still read it, right? And so this is what they did. The problem is that even though there are standards that deal with this, and my colleague Harrison Meadows at the University of UT Knoxville has done a lot of research in this in our project. As they use this, even though there are standards, most people don't follow them. And I like to say that even a single printer has their own style, but it kind of depends whether they had coffee that morning or not, and they will do something different than they or not. And so there is no way to be able to quantify this, right? Sure. It's just, there is no standard at all, essentially. So one of the solutions that we've had as we work on this is to kind of introduce predictability. So we kind of made decisions like, well, whenever you find this letter or vowel in an initial position or a medial position or a final position, you're always going to switch it to this other letter, right? Is it imperfect? Absolutely. It is there's going to be mistakes, but at least the mistake will always be predictable, and then it's easier to fix. Now, you mentioned 90% accuracy. So we've gotten already to 95.7, which sounds good. It's not. I want 99.99999 perfection, because otherwise, if you have one page, sure, you have one mistake. If you have 50,000 pages, you have thousands of mistakes, right?
Sure.
Like, this is exponential. And so the more perfect we can get it, the better. It just takes years and a lot of time to train. But it is possible.
Yeah.
You just need time and money. And when you don't have money, you just need more time.
Well, and I appreciate your dedication to the near perfect score, because obviously if you're approaching it from a literary themes perspective, you can get the message even if something is misspelled, you're going to understand that. But for other fields, and since we're all about interdisciplinarity, like say I'm already thinking somebody who wants to do historical linguistics or language variation and change over time could pick up this manuscript, and for them, they need to know, okay, was that a spelling convention or is that an AI error in, translating, I don't know if that's the right term, like in translating the document into a digital format. So there's just so many implications for achieving this. It's very exciting.
One thing that we've come up with this year, we're in the year 2 of this project, is having a more diplomatic and a more modernized version of the transcription, depending on the confidence the algorithm has on what it's transcribing. So when it's not sure, it will try to give you what it thinks is being done in the page. And when it has more confidence, it can give you the original, but it can also show you a more modernized text, because there are spellings like, for example, there's the letter cedilla that does not exist anymore, so we just auto-transcribe that as Z, for example, right? But depending on what you're doing and the confidence level you have, you can maintain the original. Now, that is useful for me in literature and cultural studies, just because I can get my preference. But if you're an archivist, if you work in a library, you might actually want better preservation. So you want to have something that's closer to the original. If you are in historical sources, you might actually need to preserve that, right? So having the option is something that we're working on as we get to improve that code.
Okay. I want you to be able to talk a little bit about the literary analysis side of your research. So can you tell us a little more about the project you're doing and kind of what, like, the scope of it?
Okay, yeah, so the project I started with a couple of years ago, it's called Renaissance, and it's all lower case except the AI, for obvious reasons, right? It's kind of a little pun. So the way I started doing this was with my colleague, Dr. Xabier Gleiser at the University of Alabama. He works in machine learning, and so he was pointed out to me by a couple of deans that, I was trying to do some work, because I was trying to do like, hey, how do I get into this AI wave to work on my humanist materials? So we started talking, and then he had the idea of doing this through Google Summer Code, which is a wonderful, wonderful program that happens every summer. It's never guaranteed, but they've been doing it for 20 years, so it seems like it's going to keep going. And what you do is essentially create a project, and you propose a project of, hey, this is what we would like to work on. And so coders and programmers for all over the world will apply for it, apply for your project if they're interested, right? It's very much, if you're interested, you can apply and then you might get picked.
So sort of like a citizen science or
Kind of.
okay.
Like
okay.
even like a science fair of sorts,
Yeah.
with like a big project. And,
Okay.
and it's an excellent way for these students. They're usually either fourth year undergraduates or like even master students. That's usually the ones who apply.
Okay.
It's a fantastic CV line for them. And then it's very good practical experience in the field with AI and with coding. And then for us, obviously, we get people who are funded by Google to work on that, because I don't know coding. I know nothing about coding, but I do know what my field needs and can benefit from. And not just my field, like any academic could benefit from better OCR in all types of documents, right? And so this is kind of usually a 16-week program or so. We're actually now in the finishing, GSOC is what we call it, just summer code.
Okay.
GSOC 25 will finish next month
Okay.
by the first week of October. So they have like a midterm presentation and they have a final exam. Like this whole thing. It's not a lot of work on the faculty side, other than it's as much of work as you want it to be.
Okay.
But it is what's enabling me. I have a team of 8 coders right now, and it's what's enabled me to be able to pursue these goals. And for example, one of the things we're doing this year, that's our second year, is we're finishing up a program, a local app. There might be a web version, but it's probably I want it to be like a local app where I'm going to distribute it for free to all academics that I know and tell them, use this. Just try to transcribe. Our model is pretty good. It's not perfect, but see what you get, and then I want feedback so that I can then go next year in year 3 to GSOC and say, okay, this is feedback we got. How can we improve this? How can we keep pushing this AI, these models to do better?
Fantastic. So your app will sort of enable other researchers to have their pet project. Like, this is the historical document that I want to have
Correct.
accessible.
And it's, by design, it's shareware. Because I cannot become a millionaire out of this because I'm not a coder. So I don't want someone else to be a millionaire with my idea. So I made it by design shareware, so it's free for everyone forever. It actually cannot be made proprietary.
Okay, very cool. Well, we will get a little bit of hands-on experience after we're done recording the podcast, because we're going to visit the NIU Book Lab, where we have a replica Gutenberg press, and we can actually make our own. We'll be able to create our own images.
Then we can get AI to process them.
And then we can feed it through the algorithm and see what we get. Okay, so if we were in computer engineering, I would be asking about like the theoretical impacts of this research. So I really appreciate that you've shared kind of that side of things with the Google Summer of Code and students in those fields. But obviously you're more on the humanist side. So what do you see as the, I don't know, practical implications, or, I mean, you've talked about the open source, but so share a little bit about that.
So, yeah, it's an interesting way to think about it, because you can't take the professor out of me in many ways. Like, my goal is still to try to teach people something useful, and I hope they will become much better than I am at either what I do or something else, right? So, as I said, I'm not a coder, so I don't know about the theoretical side of things. I can tell you about recurrent neural networks, or I can tell you about Trocker. I can tell you about many of these algorithms. I don't know what they do. I don't understand them. My coders do. My contributors do, right? So there is a research part where they do a lot of research and they produce research. And that's where I want them to be able to get publications out of this too. And that's also when, even if I'm in humanities and they are in computer engineering, I can teach them how to publish a paper, right? I have experience in that, so that's a transferable skill. And we've already managed one very nice publication as a group, as a research group, and now I have them working on different papers that they are also either going to present at conferences or try to publish. And so just as I can, guide a student in humanities, I can guide a student in computer science. The style is different for sure, and I've had to learn a little bit of formatting, but as you all know, formatting is transposable, so we can figure it out, right? And we can teach them how to do that. So that's on the theoretical side. And many of them, this work will all go on to probably motivate other research related to what we're doing, because a lot of people don't know that this could be applied to humanities, and once they see it applied, I've seen engineers to be like, oh, that's an interesting thought, like I never thought you could use it for this, and then they start looking at what else can we do this, like is there a market here, like it has implications, right?
Okay.
On the practical side, I mean, my dream is for every humanist to be able to have a digital version of whatever material they need accessible forever. That's the goal, right? Printed, I think we will get there in a few years. It's difficult, but it's not that difficult. Print material is something doable. Handwritten is that is a different beast. I still want to do it, but so this is something that we're working on this year, and we had a nice idea that just occurred to me and Dr. Meadows. It occurred to us this summer as we were trying to process handwritten materials. So most of the problem when you're training code is that you don't have ground truth. You don't have enough ground truth, right? Ground truth is when you have a scanned page, you have to give the computer the transcription so that it knows this line says this. Because if it doesn't know, it can never really train. It doesn't know how to find that information. It doesn't know how to corroborate. Mm-hmm. So once you give it the exact perfect text, then it will learn. Of course, this kind of defeats the purpose, right? Because if I have to transcribe all of this myself, then I'm not winning anything while I'm training the code, right? So it's kind of a fine balance with that. The more ground truth we have, the better it gets, right?
Okay.
And you need to train it with many different materials. So for Renaissance X, I have a lot of scans, but I don't have a lot of transcriptions. So we've done manually a couple hundred transcriptions of different files, of like 5 or so pages of different sources. And this is a way to start training it a little bit, and then it kind of picks up, and then it starts training itself, right?
Okay.
But we have to start that way. With handwritten, there's 0, right? And so part of what I thought was, okay, what if we flip the script? So instead of taking documents that don't have transcriptions and then trying to transcribe them by creating manual transcription and then trying to have the computer learn, what if I take the digital text I already have, like let's say something that has a lot of pages, like Cervantes' Quixote. It's very long, hundreds of pages, perfect, plenty of digital text that I have. And so what we did was we took some of the original sources, and so we extracted basically each letter, and we created fonts out of these files. And so once we create a font, then I go to Word and I take this document of hundreds of pages and just literally change the font and then save the document. So I have the Quixote in 3 different printing styles, and I have it handwritten now. It's not perfect. It is a generated material, so it's not real, right? But it does get quite close to the real thing. Of course, it's a dream scenario. There's no material degradation. There's no ink bleed through. There's no any sort of fuzziness. It is perfect contrast with perfect black text with perfect white background. Mm-hmm. But you do suddenly have thousands and thousands and thousands of lines of text that are known good ground truth. And so you can use that now to train. And so far, the results have been really positive. So we're kind of like, we're trying to make more of that now, see how far we can get, and then go back to, let's now try the new and improved code on the real material that has no transcriptions. And this comes through brainstorming, and that's what's important, that this is super collaborative, because, we in the humanistics side thought of this, not just because we just had this bright idea on our own, but because talking to the coders made me think, me and Dr. Meadows, we were thinking like, well, if this is kind of what they're trying to do, like how about we switch the direction, right? And it takes people with different skills and different experiences and different perspectives to figure out that. And I'll just finish this long point with one example that I particularly really like as a big fan of the Matrix trilogy. If you remember the first movie, when there was that big scene where Neo is kind of like avoiding bullets and like the camera pans around, everyone was like, whoa, how did you do that? Like, that's just, how does that even happen? And then you see the making of, and you see like, well, you just need 360 cameras in a circle, and then you put the character in the middle, and you take a picture at the same time. And you have 360 frames. Like, it's so simple. But you wouldn't think of it until you think of it. And this was that kind of moment. It's like, oh, I don't need to brute force my way out of it. I can just create nearly identical materials of what I already have and then work backwards.
Sort of reverse engineer the process. Fantastic. Well, that was my next question. That was what's an exciting aspect? So I love it. I'm going to switch now to just something I want to pick your brain about. So as a former language program director, and we're both directors of undergraduate studies, if there were, say, somebody in the room who is, let's say, hesitant to use AI in their teaching or for their students to use it because it just seems like a Pandora's box to that person, well, what advice would you give them about, just how to even just start small, or with some of the potential for use of these different tools in specifically world language classrooms, but maybe, again, a transferable skill to other fields as well?
So I understand the fear. I absolutely do, because 20 years ago it was the same issue with Google, right? When Google search became a thing, our professors were afraid that the academic essay was dead, because students had access to all this information and then they would not learn anything, yada yada. That clearly has not happened. So 20 years later, now we have a similar conversation, right? Like, artificial intelligence can actually write all of this for you, therefore no one else is going to write an essay. We don't have a way to evaluate in the humanities. That is inaccurate. Mainly because, as we've been talking today, artificial intelligence or alternative intelligence does not think like you do. It cannot process the same way you do. It can seem like it knows everything. It does not. And it's really bad at nuance. Now, I'm going to check that this is 2025 and we are in September 12th. So in 40 years, when someone listens to this and is laughing at us, it probably won't be the case. But for now, at least, it cannot do it. It does not know nuance. And that's part of the big difference, right? So I am not afraid of it, because as any tool, it can be used for good or for evil.
Yeah. Well, and I will say, the person that I was referring to was myself. It's not that I'm afraid my students, like, I believe that my students are academically curious and they are here for the right reasons. And I mean, otherwise you'd want to rethink all of your motivations for university study. But as far as like me using AI as a tool in my classroom, I just don't even know where to begin.
So I use it a lot, and I make my students use it also for courses.
Okay.
I think it actually improves the experience in many ways. I use it for different cases like image generation, transcripts. We use it for description generation, things like that.
Okay.
The main difference here is that if a student is trying to write, if it's still in ChatGPT, for example, or any of the other large language models, like, write a 3-page essay for me on this topic, it will write 3 pages, but you will quickly realize how they don't make a ton of sense. They might seem to make sense, but once you actually try to understand it, they don't really.
Okay.
Now, if the information is on the internet, and we already know because it's been in the news, and there's been in the political world, there's been hearings about this, that basically they have already consumed the internet already. They have read literally everything that has ever been written on the internet. It has been trained on.
And there you are, putting more content in.
Yeah, I'm trying to put more content in. I want to be better. But the point is that if you ask it something that is a generic information, it can probably spit that out to you. Like, it can give you a text that is, okay, here's factoid 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It depends, or I would say maybe that what the responsibility here is on the professors to actually make better activities. Like, if you just tell me, write an essay about the life of this writer, it can probably be done with AI. But that is also a lazy assignment, in my opinion. That does not, what did I teach the student? I taught them to get some data from the internet and then just repeat it and never remember it again, because it doesn't matter. Now, if I'm telling a student, well, we worked through this theater play, and then we worked through this novel. And I want you, in this essay, I want you to think about why this particular, let's say, commedia, which is a particular genre in early modern works, why is it problematic within the framework of a commedia? Like, how does it follow or doesn't follow the conventions of commedia? That cannot be answered by GPT. First of all, because there's many contradictory answers on the internet, so there's no one answer. Second, you can tie this to materials that you worked on in class. So from what we've seen in class and the specific works, I mean, it would be quite coincidental if someone chose 2 specific works that I've planned that are, nothing has been published on that comparison, right? But you can tie it to your class, and that is not something easily done by AI, because it requires nuance, and it does not know how to do that. What it can do is help a student figure some things out. So
find some sources, or...
Correct. Find some sources, or even if they did not fully understand the story, because we're talking about L2 learners here.
Second language, yeah.
Correct.
Right.
So you can ask it, okay, did this really happen in this story? Can you confirm? It can, and even then, I would be careful, because anything that's content-wise, it still does make mistakes.
Yeah.
20 years from now, I might get it, but right now it doesn't. So you still have to be careful. But you can use it a little bit as an assistant, right?
Almost like a comprehension check.
Correct.
Yeah.
One of the things that I tell my students to do, and they report good things on, is I'll send them a text, let's say an article, right? And I'll tell them, ask GPT to ask you 5 questions to check your comprehension on this. And you can use it as a study guide in that sense. It will, the several times that I've done it, the questions that it gave me were actually good. Like generic enough that, yes, if you answer those questions, you need to understand what you read to be able to answer them. It might not be perfect to the exact points, but it does show that you understood the text. And in the end, when I teach a class, obviously I want my students to get everything perfectly, but that's not realistic. And that is what I end up doing. Like, did you get the general idea and you have some main points to be able to justify your position? If you do, and if the AI can help you do that, it is actually assisting.
Okay, so play around with it. Don't be afraid to experiment.
Correct.
All right, I like it. All right, well, let's close by just any upcoming projects you want to share or that you're excited about.
Well, I like to say that I have many things at the stove happening, right? So my AI work continues. I'm at the second GSOC program, so I'm now thinking of next summer, of summer 2026, what kind of project we're going to propose. And it will be a continuation of what we're doing. It just depends on what we're going to do, end up in the next 3-4 weeks. Depending on the quality of the code, the quality of the app that we release, and whatever feedback I get, that's will inform what I will propose for next year. We want to get more into handwriting, as I said, so we'll see how what we're doing now works out. And then there's just the rest of my other work that is correlated, right? Like I'm writing my second book, which is on historical crime, gender roles in early modernity. There's a lot of killings that I look at when, what happened, who killed whom and why, and who got justice, who didn't, and all of that. Then as I get more documents, and as I get more documents in my archives, then that feeds also into my AI projects, right? Because then I have new sources with different types of printing or different types of handwriting. So all of it kind of is just kind of like a virtuous circle. They seem disparate, but again, they are connected.
Fantastic. Well, Xabi, thank you so much for being here today with us on the SISL podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you so much for listening to SISL Presents, a language and literacy podcast. Our intro music was Heal the World, performed by the NIU Steel Band. If you enjoyed this episode, consider sharing it with a colleague, student, or friend who might be interested. And make sure to follow us wherever you get your podcasts.